view. At the same time, it's a human right, number one. Number two, there are many of us who are out teachers, and we need to feel safe in our workplaces, that we don't have to deny and hide ourselves. But also, obviously, for our students, we know, again, I could ramble on about some rates around suicide, but I think you all know here that it is much higher for LGBT youth. So, you know, and how intersectionality is really what I want to talk about, and how racism gets played out in not dealing with these issues and continues to divide us. So for us as educators, we have to address these issues because, number one, we're legally responsible to, but also in our fight for all human rights, in terms of racism, classism, sexism, that they're all interconnected and that we don't see them as separate. And then when we hear responses around, oh, it's that group, that's the racism, the ugly head of racism coming out again. So I think we have to also think about that in terms of who our youth are and what kind of curriculum we are providing that addresses all of those oppressions, and not just to talk about it in very singular ways, because we all need to move together. You know, that saying, an injury to one is an injury to all, is true, and it very much needs to be connected. So, I mean, in terms of elementary school, it's really important that we have a representation of diverse families, obviously for our students as well too, right? Because we know that they're coming from various backgrounds, and we need to make sure that that is there. We hear all the time in school, I heard it constantly, when I went to school and then when I was a teacher, that's so gay. I mean, we hear that constantly, and one of the things that teachers talk about in our workshop is, how do I deal with that still today? They're still trying to deal with that, and they hear it all the time. And I would say, in some ways, it feels like it's more at this point. And, you know, we have Bill 157, which was new legislation that came out that talks about bullying. However, on the forms, it doesn't actually recognize, like, homophobic bullying isn't actually on there, but it is part of it. And when the training happens, the board tends to forget about mentioning that, oh, that would be part of it too. So we want to get to specifics on why are children getting bullied, and, you know, make sure that we are following the law as well too. So that bill should help us, but only, you know, if it's implemented, which is always the problem. I think someone outside was saying, you know, really great policies that the board may have. However, where's the implementation of those policies? How are youth safe in their schools? So that was about all that I was really going to talk about. I know that I don't want to repeat a lot of points. And I guess, you know, I mean, our main goal as elementary teachers is to make sure that our schools are safe and that all our children are able to feel healthy about who they are, and then they're not to feel shameful of what they love, what they desire, what they're attracted to, and that we support that type of education, and we are going to continue, along with everybody else, to make sure that the children don't feel that shame, and particularly being queer, that's very, very important, because, you know, we're constantly told to get back in that closet. So, you know, I'm very, again, happy to see all of you here, knowing that there's such strong support and that we're moving together towards equality, freedom, and justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Our next panelist is Noah Mendelsohn-Aviv. Did I get that right? Yes? Close enough? Okay. From the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Noah joined the Canadian Civil Liberties Association in 2002 as director of CCLA's Equality Program. Noah works on such issues as protections for migrants and refugees, healthcare, LGBTQ rights, race and gender issues, mental health in prisons, and generally the rights of persons who are marginalized or disadvantaged. Noah has also served as CCLA's Freedom of Expression Project Director and dealt extensively with free speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of religion. Please give it up for Noah.
Good evening, everybody. Can somebody put their hand up in the back to let me know if I need to lean more forward? Or a hand up if you can hear me? Back? Yes, good? Okay. I'm here from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. I'm here primarily to talk to you about GSAs because that has been an issue in which we've been involved pretty much from the beginning. And I should tell you that the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, very briefly, is a national organization. We have thousands of members across the country. Our organization was founded in 1964. Since that time, we've acquired some knowledge and expertise about rights and freedoms, and that's what I want to hopefully contribute to this panel tonight, is to talk about what rights and freedoms do we actually have, and what do our judges have to say about all this. But before I go there, I want to tell you that I've been doing some thinking, because thinking and sorting through policy is a very important part of my job. And I've been thinking about the idea of an all-purpose equality club, and what does that really mean? I addressed this issue at the Halton Catholic District School Board. I spoke there last week. And I need to say that as the director of an equality program, and you heard about it just now, I do see the value of having a group that addresses different kinds of discrimination and making connections between them. I can see the connections and intersections, some of which we just heard about, between racism, anti-immigration sentiments, and some of the public hyperbole that we're hearing against certain religious groups. We can also see connections and intersections between sexism and homophobia, and the connections between all of those things together. It's the big picture vision that looks at the interconnections, that looks at how these forms of discrimination are played out, whether it's stereotyping, fear-mongering, slurs, violence, government action or inaction on these topics. And most importantly, is the big picture that allows us to think about fighting these forms of hatred. So with sincere apologies to those of you who expected me to say something different, I wanted to tell this group that actually, I think equality clubs are a fantastic idea. I think schools should create them, and I think schools should foster them. There's just a tiny little but coming. The but is, when the school creates its equality club and they have their end of school barbecue, it would be really nice if they also invited the students from the GSAs and from the anti-racism clubs and from the feminist societies, because they're all working towards the same goal. And there's another little but. If you create an equality club in a school and at the same time do it in order to create a ban on gay positive groups, that's a contradiction in terms. That's not good enough. Or if you create an equality club in your school and tell the students, that's really for your gay-straight alliance. Don't call it a gay-straight alliance. Don't use the word gay. If you do that, there too, you are sending a message of intolerance and discrimination that is unacceptable. That is also a contradiction in terms. An equality club should not be used to tell students to hide who they are. And finally, my last but about the equality clubs, if your equality or equity club is based on guidelines, whether it's the pastoral guidelines to assist students of same-sex orientation that are used in some of the school boards, or Courage, a group that uses the Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program in their efforts to assist LGBTQ students. And I'll quote to you some of the things that are on that 12-step program. If you succeed in this program, you would make these kinds of statements. 1, we admitted that we were powerless over homosexuality and our lives had become unmanageable. I'm quoting, by the way. 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And I'm skipping through a couple, but just 2 more. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And the final one I wanted to point out, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of our character. If this is what your equality club is about, that's a contradiction in terms, and clearly that's not good enough. So I don't want to spend time telling you all why students need GSAs. You heard it beautifully from the empowered and courageous students who are demanding it in their schools, and I think we're going to be hearing from a lot more in the time to come. What I want to tell you is that even if you weren't able to come up with all these good and excellent reasons that were put forward about why we need gay-straight alliances, You don't have to justify your fundamental rights. You don't have to explain why you need the kinds of rights and freedoms that are stated in our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They are protected there for a reason. And they apply to all people in Canada, whether you're under or over the age of 18. And that very much includes those incredible people that we heard here tonight. And when it comes to the issue of gay positive clubs in schools, there are no less than 3 fundamental rights, all of which protected in our charter. Freedom of association, the right to form groups, freedom of expression, and the right to equality. And what that means in this context is that students have the right, without any need for an explanation, to associate with people of their choosing, to express who they are and what they believe in through the name of their club, and to be treated equally by their schools. And yes, it's true, under Section 1 of the Charter, that all the rights and freedoms in it can be subject to such reasonable limits as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. What that means is that if school authorities want to stop students from having gay positive groups, the school would have to show that they have a good and justifiable reason to block them. And if you ask me, when you throw everything into the balance, the school's freedom of religion on the one side, and all the stuff that's on the other side, the horrible stuff, the bullying, the homophobia, the slurs, the violence, the devastating rates of teen suicide, and all the positive stuff, the impact of the GSAs, what the educational leaders are saying, it's no contest. So it seems very clear to me that there is no reasonable justification to ban gay positive groups in schools, and I can't tell you for 100% certainty that that's what the courts would say, but I can tell you what they have said on very similar issues. Courts have said that students are no less deserving of constitutional protection than adults, although their age, vulnerability, and presence in a school environment all factor in the totality of circumstances. Courts have said that the courts must give adolescents room to exercise their autonomy to the extent that their maturity allows. And if this is an issue of autonomy, I don't know what is. Our courts have said that there is no reason, this was in regard to a police search that was done in a school, there is no reason why police should not be required to comply with the usual standards merely because the person they wish to search is in attendance at an elementary or a secondary school. Courts have said that schools have a duty to foster the respect of their students for the constitutional rights of all members of society. Learning respect for those rights is essential to our democratic society and should be part of the education of all students. These values are best taught by example and may be undermined if the students' rights are ignored by those in authority. Our courts have said the Supreme Court has repeatedly confirmed that freedom of religion is not absolute, and that in appropriate cases, it is subject to limitation. And this was the recent Saskatchewan Marriage Commissioner's case that some of you may be familiar with. This is clearly one of those situations where religious freedom must yield to the larger public interest.
I'm going to give you 20 seconds to wrap up.
I'll give you some of the other quotes later if you want them. I'll just give you one of my favorites from Trinity Western.
One last one.
One last one, and then I'm going to conclude as well, if I may.
You're a little over, so if you can do it in 20 seconds, you can conclude and give us one last one.
Sure, thank you. I've lost it. Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, albeit in the dissent in that particular case, said that the importance of ensuring an equal and discrimination-free educational environment and the perception of fairness and tolerance in the classroom are paramount in the education of young children. So here's how I want to conclude. There's a lot of bad news when it comes to the Gay-Straight Alliance story and the Gay Positive Club story, but there's some really good news too. Through public scrutiny and public pressure, the Halton Catholic District School Board still rescinded their written ban. They felt they had to because they knew the public wouldn't stand for it. There are students out there now in 2 schools who are demanding a GSA and who are